Do I think this could be a special year for Polkadot? I think so, because DOT going to the price of $150, that right there wouldn't surprise me whatsoever, even though that's not financial advice. But the reason why I think this year could be so special is because we all know that the last Bitcoin halving event happened back in April. And the reason why I want to mention this is because throughout history, we've seen time and time again when usually altcoins peak as a worst case scenario. Now, this is not a surefire date, and I'm not guaranteeing anything, but I think this does give a good benchmark, even though history may not repeat itself, only time will tell. But I'm still going to take a look at this anyways, because usually, again, around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event is when altcoins peak as a worst case scenario. Now, if we consider how April was the last Bitcoin halving event back in 2024, 18 months from then is actually around October of 2025. Now, again, I'm not saying that DOT is going to peak exactly at that time. I'm not saying that, but then that does give a good benchmark as to when we could see things very well peak as a worst case scenario, especially for an altcoin much like DOT. Now, people may think that, okay, that's good and all, but Polkadot, it has too many competitors. Oh, it's trash. But that's actually not true. I mean, Polkadot doesn't have that many good competitors, if any, really. If you think about Polkadot's main competitor, I would argue that it's Axelar, but Axelar doesn't have the size, it doesn't have the fans, it doesn't have the adoption, and also on top of that, it doesn't have the reputation that Polkadot has. When it comes to this market, in terms of being focused on interoperability, connecting blockchains together, Polkadot is pretty much the dominating player. So imagine once a bunch of retail hype, FOMO, and buying pressure when it comes to these interoperability-oriented projects really enters in a massive way, much like what we saw with Solana, with BNB, and some others. Could you imagine what gains most of the attention? Hypothetically, I think it's going to be something like Polkadot, because of course, when something is focused on a market and the market actually has good potential and then it's pretty much a dominating player, we could very well see this be really something amazing. Take a look at Ethereum. It pretty much dominates the layer 1 blockchain space in terms of fans and reputation, even though people may argue that it has some drawbacks, which I do believe. The gas fees and scalability issues are still a big problem, even though there are layer 2s. It's kind of nonsense, to be honest. Even despite that, it has this dominating reputation. So when you take a look at something like Polkadot, something that pretty much has a commanding force in this market that it's focused on, this niche, I would say, this is going to be very beneficial, especially as this bull run progresses. Now, why is Polkadot so amazing and why is interoperability, I think, going to be a big narrative? It's because despite many blockchains out there, many networks existing, still even despite that, many of them can't freely send data and value to each other. Of course, meaning that they lack interoperability. Even Bitcoin and Ethereum have this problem with one another, by the way. So when you think about that, what is the solution? That's something like Polkadot, connecting blockchains together. That's very amazing. Now, you may be thinking, okay, why is having interoperability such a major issue? Like, who cares if they can't send data and value to each other? Well, I think this right here is crucial for the growth of the blockchain space. And not to mention, if you take a look at, let's say, a real-life example, hypothetically, in a make-believe scenario, let's say there's a gas station, and this gas station only can fuel cars that are made by a certain brand. Wouldn't that be a complete nonsense thing? I mean, imagine if it can only fill Toyotas. Then what happens if a Volkswagen pops up, or a Chevy, or a Ford? You know what I mean? They have to go through a different gas station. If that were the case, I think the adoption of cars in general wouldn't really be that amazing. It'd be just pretty much dominated by one car brand, and then if people don't like it, pretty much they look for other options. So of course, that's not a good thing to have, much like in the world of blockchain technology. Now, of course, that problem doesn't exist in real life. But if you take a look at, for instance, something like in the world of blockchain technology, that right there is pretty much still a big issue. So of course, Polkadot, they're looking to change all that, and they understand that this is going to be a big problem moving forward, because this is only natural that something needs solving, because there's going to be more blockchains that are going to pop up. It's only natural as the space grows overall, especially as institutional adoption enters in a massive way. It's only fair to assume that will be the case. So of course, many of them do need interoperability, and Polkadot is there. It's waiting in the wings. Now, again, Polkadot is not a small project by any means. It's not the biggest either, but I think it's heading in the right direction. Also, take a look at its canary network called Kusama, which, by the way, is a place where usually projects that want to launch on Polkadot, they'll usually launch there first as a way to test out the project. And then if they like it, they usually move on to Polkadot later on. Kusama is a good way to funnel in more projects to Polkadot, because after all, Kusama is a lot cheaper, a lot easier to make changes on when it comes to Polkadot. And again, people usually want to start off with Kusama before they move on to Polkadot. That's a good idea to have that, because that gives sort of like a free trial in a sense. Sometimes when people say, hey, buy this product, if you don't like it, return it in 30 days or whatever, it's kind of something like that. Even though projects can choose to stay in Kusama entirely if they don't want to move on to Polkadot, even though that is the case, much like Moonriver, it doesn't really matter because I think if anything, generally speaking, this is a good segue to Polkadot. So Polkadot, they have this dialed down. They are focused on the right market. They understand where the problems are in the blockchain technology space. Not to mention, they understand that there needs to be a way to funnel in more projects through a cheaper and more cost-effective approach and also an easier approach, much like Kusama. They have this whole system dialed down in a sense. They have it to a T. It's very rare we see projects out there that are buttoned up like that, if that makes sense. A lot of other projects out there, they feel very messy. I'm not talking about Messi, the soccer player. I'm talking about just like Messi in general. They just don't feel like they have all the parts in the right place. It just feels like it's too many moving pieces. You know what I mean? So the way to take a look at it is that when it comes to something like Polkadot, this is pretty much a very perfect project, in my opinion at least. Now, of course, nothing is perfect, but I think this is pretty much as close as it gets. Now, people may think that, okay, wow, Polkadot, it doesn't have a good community. Well, I'll disagree with that. Polkadot has a very fantastic community. As a matter of fact, currently there's over 1 million holders, so that's insane. And why is having a good and passionate community so important, in my opinion? It's because if you think about it, social proof does matter. Imagine, let's say someone puts a product on Amazon, they want to sell it there, and every single product review is like negative. Even if, let's say, I think this product is good, even if I've tried it in real life, if I read those reviews, I may be like turned away by that. I'd be like, oh yeah, that's actually very bad. Why are there so many bad reviews? You know what I mean? So social proof, again, does matter. It's like typically when 11 people believe in something, the 12th person is going to have a very high likelihood, especially if they're part of that group or whatever, in believing that same thing too. Like for instance, believing that a product is bad on Amazon, 11 people write a bad review, the 12th person is probably going to be like, yeah, it's probably bad. You know what I mean? Instead of putting 5 stars, they might put 3, even though they think it's actually 5. Now, this is just a hypothetical scenario, but when it comes to Polkadot, because it has a very good community, when the price isn't doing the best, when it comes to DOT, and also when things aren't really looking that exciting, the community doesn't turn on the project. You know what I mean? They still have that same enthusiasm, that same drive. And I think that right there really does matter because people usually, they understand that mass scale adoption for a project doesn't happen like overnight. It doesn't happen in a week, in a month. They understand it takes time. But sometimes for other projects, people are impatient. But for whatever reason, when it comes to Polkadot, people are very passionate. And I do really like that. The community is amazing. DOT is listed in a bunch of major exchanges. And I think all of this right here is really going to play to its benefit, especially as of right now. There's over 600 million crypto owners, according to Crypto.com research, more than ever before in history. I think this board could be so amazing. It's just a waiting game. I'm still staying patient, still acquiring DOT because I think $150 wouldn't surprise me whatsoever during this bull run. And make sure to subscribe if you gain value from this video. I greatly appreciate it. It's Mali the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace. Bye.